The story begins in Djibouti, East Africa, a small nation bordering Ethiopia and the Red Sea. It was France's last colony on the African continent, a land on the edge of independence. The year is 1976, just 1 year before Djibouti finally gains its freedom, and the country is simmering with tension, fire, and blood. One quiet morning, a teacher named Jane steps out of her Land Rover and walks into her classroom. She writes the date on the chalkboard, March 3, 1976, and waits patiently for her students to arrive. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a group of French children are on their way to school. A large yellow bus makes its usual stops, driven by a man named Francois. Among the passengers is a young boy named Bernardo, who climbs aboard with a smile. But this morning is different. Someone else steps onto the bus, a man carrying a gun. Francois barely has time to react before a weapon, an old French-made Max 1950, is pointed straight at his head. In that moment, he realizes this morning will be unlike any other. The armed men order him to drive the bus toward the Somali border, and with that command, it began. This is 15 minutes of war. Back in town, Bernardo's father sees what's happening and desperately tries to chase the bus, but it's no use. Francois follows the gunman's orders, swerving off the main road and speeding down empty rural paths toward the desert. Inside, the terrified children stay quiet, trying to remain calm under the watch of their captors. Soon, 2 military jeeps appear on the road behind them, and the chase intensifies. Back at the school, Jane starts to sense something is wrong. The clock strikes 9, and none of her students have arrived. She walks over to another classroom, only to find 4 children sitting there. Something terrible is unfolding this morning. Out on the road, the pursuit continues. Francois is forced to drive faster, pressing harder on the gas as the armed men grow impatient. Up ahead, the French gendarmerie has set up a roadblock near the border. Spike strips are laid across the asphalt, and the gates are lowered, but the bus barrels straight through without slowing down. Tires burst, the engine dies, and the vehicle finally grinds to a halt in the middle of the desert road. Soldiers rush in from every direction, surrounding the area. The terrorists realize there's no turning back. Francois is released and sent forward as a messenger, ordered to deliver their demands. They're holding 21 children hostage, and they want safe passage into Somalia. The news spreads quickly all the way to Paris. The French government classifies the event as a terrorist act. The kidnappers are demanding 2 things: the withdrawal of France from Djibouti and the release of political prisoners fighting for independence. In response, Captain André Gerval is called in. He leads GIGN, France's elite tactical police unit, newly formed and trained for counterterrorism and hostage rescue. This will be their first ever international mission. André wastes no time. He gathers his team, boards a transport plane, and flies straight to Djibouti. Upon arrival, he meets an American advisor, Philip Schaefer, a CIA operative sent to oversee the mission. Meanwhile, André's men begin preparing their weapons. At the border, Jane rushes to the scene as soon as she hears about the hijacking. She pleads with Captain Ramani, the officer in charge, to let her volunteer as a hostage. When he refuses, she makes a bold move, running straight toward the bus. She tries to reason with the leader of the gunmen, a man named Barkhad, telling him the children will need her. They know her as their teacher, and only she can keep them calm. Her courage pays off. Barkhad considers her words and eventually allows her aboard the bus. Inside, Jane finds her terrified students and tries to comfort them, offering the only sense of safety they have left. By nightfall, Captain André and his GIGN squad are on their way to the Somali border. Riding on military trucks, the men laugh and talk, unaware of just how dangerous their mission is about to become. When they finally arrive, they can see the stranded school bus in the distance under the dim desert light. André meets with a French general named Favrart, who gives him permission to prepare for the operation in detail. Meanwhile, inside the bus, Jane continues her quiet bravery. She stays close to her students, trying to distract them from their fear. She even comforts little Bernardo, whose cheek is still swollen after being struck by one of the kidnappers. A few hundred meters away, André begins a tactical briefing. He learns there are 4 hostage takers, members of a militant group known as the FLCS, the Front for the Liberation of the Somali Coast. Their goal is simple but deadly: to cross the border and escape into Somalia. André sends 2 of his best men, Yorka and Jean-Luc Laurent, to scout the area and take sniper positions. The 2 move out quietly, rifles in hand, settling into the rocky terrain. Meanwhile, André edges closer to the bus himself, observing every detail. The vehicle has broken down in the middle of a wide, open plain, offering no real cover. Any move toward it would be seen immediately. Still, Andre keeps advancing, crawling closer until he's dangerously near the bus. His men watching from above are stunned. Suddenly, Jane steps off the bus, intending to relieve herself. She freezes when she spots Andre nearby but remains calm, returning quietly to the bus without alerting the gunman. Then, without warning, floodlights blaze across the field. Andre has been spotted. He sprints for cover as the desert erupts in chaos. Back at the command post, his furious men argue with the soldiers who turned on the lights, ruining their stealth plan. The operation has fallen into confusion. Inside the bus, however, Jane remains composed. She sits across from Barkhad, who begins to speak. He reveals that he was once a teacher too, just like her. He says he loved his students deeply, so much that he couldn't bear to see them grow up under foreign rule. Inside the general's tent, Andre is furious. His entire reconnaissance mission has just been compromised, and he demands answers. But the general barely reacts. Instead, he asks how Andre plans to carry out the military operation scheduled for the next morning. Andre explains his approach with calm precision. The plan is to take down all 4 hostage-takers at once, using coordinated sniper fire. A simple plan, but also quick and lethal. The general, Favrart, isn't convinced. GIGN is barely a year old, still inexperienced, and this is their first international operation. If the plan fails, France will be humiliated before the world, and with the CIA observing the mission closely, the consequences could be disastrous. Favrart's main concern isn't even the terrorists, but the threat of the Somali military or foreign militias, who could intervene at any moment. At the time, Somalia was under strong Soviet influence, and if the situation escalated, the Soviet-backed army could easily crush the French presence in Djibouti. But Andre doesn't back down. Confident in his men, he insists on moving forward with the plan. He briefs his team, checks every weapon, and gives the order to prepare for the rescue operation at dawn. The snipers take their positions in the rocky hills, keeping their distance from the border between Somalia and French-controlled territory. As the first light breaks over the desert, Andre and his squad move quietly into position, each man carrying a long rifle and a sidearm. Through their scopes, the bus appears still. The hostages seem unharmed, and for a moment, the desert feels frozen in silence. The 5 rifles are cocked in unison, each marksman confident and ready. Targets are assigned. All that's left is the command to fire. Andre radios the general, requesting authorization to execute the strike. But the response comes back negative. The higher authorities in Paris have intervened. They order that no shot be fired until all but 1 of the hostages are released. In other words, the children must be freed first. Andre is furious. He knows this isn't about strategy, it's about politics. France doesn't want to lose face in front of the Americans or risk provoking the Somalis and their Soviet allies. So the squad is forced to wait, lying under the scorching African sun as the hours drag on. The standoff continues until Andre receives new orders. The general wants to send supplies to the hostages. A white vehicle slowly approaches the stranded bus. Captain Ramani steps out, carrying food for the children inside. He pleads with Barkhad, the leader of the kidnappers, to release a few of the children in exchange for the food. But Barkhad refuses. Tension fills the air. Then one of the girls, little Louise, runs forward and hugs Captain Ramani tightly. At that same moment, Andre spots movement through his scope. Armed Somali militia are approaching from the distance, heavily equipped. The situation is about to spiral out of control. Inside the bus, the tension explodes. Ramani refuses to give up Louise, while Jane begs Barkhad to lower his weapon. Up in the hills, Sniper Camper steadies his aim, his crosshairs locked on Barkhad's head. Andre hesitates, knowing that one wrong move could cost all their lives. And then a single gunshot shatters the silence. Barkhad executes Captain Ramani at point-blank range. Panic ripples through the scene. Through the sniper scope, the team watches in disbelief as Ramani's lifeless body is dragged away. 30 minutes pass, and the atmosphere turns heavy. Captain Andre's squad is drained, stuck in the middle of endless political negotiations and diplomatic hesitation. One life has already been lost, and morale is slipping fast. Inside the bus, Jane remains worried about young Bernardo, whose face wound has worsened. She begs Barkhad to let her go find medicine, but he ignores her. He's focused on something else entirely, waiting for his extraction and support from Somali militia forces. Meanwhile, up at the command post, Captain Andre argues with General Favrart. The general insists they should pull back. Andre's team, after all, has come from Paris, not from Djibouti, and without clear orders from higher command, Favrart wants them to stand down and wait. But before the argument can continue, Jane suddenly appears, bringing Bernardo with her. Against all odds, she has convinced Barkhad to release the boy, whose condition has grown serious. Andre takes this opportunity to question her. She explains that each of the kidnappers carries an assault rifle and 2 grenades, and that by nightfall, they plan to take all the hostages across the Somali border. Both Andre and the general now realize time is running out. If they don't act soon, these children may never see their families again. Soon after, supplies finally arrive. The soldiers receive food and water, and Jane brings water bottles and small rations to the children inside the bus. As the day drags on, Andre climbs up to higher ground with Philip, the CIA advisor, to survey the situation. What they see shocks them both. Among the Somali militia gathered near the border stands a white man. Philip studies him carefully and concludes he must be KGB, a Soviet intelligence operative. It's a chilling reminder that even in this remote corner of Africa, the Cold War's shadow looms large. But the longer they wait, the worse things get. The men from Paris are exhausted, their strength fading under the merciless African sun. Their heads pound, their vision blurs, and Andre knows they can only last a few more hours before the heat breaks them completely. Then a vehicle appears in the distance. It's the transport meant to take the children into Somalia. Barkhad's moment has arrived. Andre radios for final approval to engage, but the general refuses once again. Frustrated and fed up with the endless politics, Andre makes a decision. He will act, with or without permission. The targets are confirmed one last time. Andre gives a silent command, and the rifles fire in perfect sync. The sudden shots echo across the borderlands. Barkhad's men fall, and the Somali militia, startled and confused, rush toward the fence line, waiting for their next orders. Inside the bus, Barkhad and his men are dead. The gunfire fades, leaving only silence and the heavy stillness of the desert. Jane gathers herself and begins waking the children who have fallen asleep in exhaustion. From a distance, the last surviving militant from Barkhad's group notices movement. Suspicious, he runs toward the bus, determined to kill her. Before he reaches her, a single shot cuts through the air, and he collapses before he can fire. That shot reveals Andre's position. Within moments, the Somali militia opens fire in every direction. Bullets rip through the sand as machine guns roar across the plain. These fighters are not like Barkhad or Andre. They care little for targets or tactics. They spray bullets at everything that moves. The MG-42s keep firing endlessly, clattering with the sound of old steel that refuses to rest. Andre's team returns fire from cover, their rifles cracking back in short bursts. Lorraine and Camper focus on suppressing the attackers, slowly pushing them back. But the militia shifts its aim toward the bus, sending a storm of bullets toward the trapped children. Seeing this, Yorka, Camper, and Lieutenant Pierre rush to protect the bus. Inside, Jane picks up Barkhad's weapon. Her hands shake, but she steadies herself and prepares to defend the students. Yorka and Camper reach the bus and join her as the firefight intensifies. Amid the chaos, Lorraine accidentally shoots a man among the Somali ranks, the white foreigner who had been directing them. He was the suspected KGB agent who had fueled the conflict from the shadows. Even with many of their men dead, the Somali fighters keep advancing. It seems as if nothing can stop them. For everyone who falls, another rises, only to be cut down again. The battlefield becomes a wasteland of smoke, fire, and bodies. Camper is hit in the leg but continues to fight until the militia finally retreats. When the dust settles, the silence feels heavier than the gunfire that came before it. The ground is littered with the dead. General Favrart, having finished his political negotiations, sends vehicles to retrieve the hostages. One by one, the children are rescued. Yorka and Camper manage a tired smile of relief, but that relief vanishes when they notice one of the children is motionless. Louise has been shot. To Captain Andre, that single loss wipes away any sense of victory. Hours later, he meets with General Favrart, who congratulates him on what he calls a successful mission. Andre cannot accept that. A little girl has died, and to him that is failure. He asks who will have the courage to tell Louise's parents that their daughter died in a mission considered successful. Favrart says it is better to bury one child than to lose an entire class and their teacher. His words offer no comfort. For Andre, it is deeply personal. He is a father, too, with a young daughter in Paris who lies ill in a hospital bed. By nightfall, the surviving children are reunited with their families. Andre and his men prepare to return to France. 1 year later, Djibouti achieves independence and becomes a free nation. 3 months after the operation, Andre's team is officially recognized as the GIGN. Over the next 40 years, they will rescue more than 600 hostages, losing only 11 members in the process. The story ends with a somber truth. The hostages, the victims, and their families were never officially recognized by the French government as victims of terrorism. Even decades later, they still live with the trauma of that day, carrying wounds that never truly healed. So the moral of the story is, sometimes even a victory can feel like a loss when an innocent life is gone, because no amount of medals or recognition can quiet the sound of a child's last breath.